Hello, dear ones. I am so happy to be back in the woods today. It's been a while. I usually have a shorter walk on the street, but when I have a little bit more leeway in my day, I take myself out into the woods. And this morning is just so lovely. My little creek. Because we got a little dusting of snow, just enough to make it warmer, but not so much that I had to do a big snow plowing, digging out. So lovely, although we are expecting a large storm this weekend. Let's see. Anyways, I'm thinking about my recent autism evaluation and diagnosis, and thinking this might be a lovely time to chat through some of that. And something that brought it to mind right now was how I've gone from living a life, from my earliest memories to about the age of 35, where I was in constant distress. So many people I talk to, they'll talk about childhood with fond memories. I have no fond memories of childhood. I was, like I said, just distressed the whole time, varying levels of distress, but always distressed. And that was my experience all the way through my life until about 35, like I said. And I had been told that I would, this is my favorite spot. Hello, little tree. I love this little tree. I had been told that I would either end up dying by suicide or institutionalized. I had been given every psychiatric diagnosis, borderline, rapid cycling bipolar, depression, anxiety, CPTSD, all of it, TBI, and there was not a lot of hope for me. They tried every medication. I was having regular panic attacks and self-harm and migraines and, being put on probation at jobs because I was crying all day. Where am I? I've lost my way. Let's see. Yeah, took a little turn here that maybe some skiers took. Let me find my way back. So really there was kind of this hopelessness, both from the medical perspective and my own perspective, my family's perspective, my partner at the time, my friends, family, sort of everyone was like, I don't know, it's a disaster, no hope. There was even a particularly painful moment when my partner received a letter from my mom saying, it just is a disaster wherever our child is around, so maybe you should save yourself. And it's very strange to have had a life like that and then to now be living such a peaceful, lovely existence where I'm very happy and content and don't have any drama or distress in my life. It sort of is like a 1 + 1 = 5. Like, it doesn't really add up in the way that would be expected through the lens of how I was seen. And what's most interesting to me about this autism evaluation is that the evaluator, as we went through all the questions, kept remarking about how incredible it is that I have accommodated my life in such a way that through accommodations, I don't appear to be in as much distress. But if you were, so like my disability was very obvious when I was unaccommodated and very interfering with my ability to function in society. And when accommodated, it has become far less obvious. Although if someone were to follow me with a camera day to day, they'd be like, oh my gosh, you live such an unusual life, right? So that is resonant with the social model of disability, which says that what is disabling is the societal expectations and lack of access to accommodations. It's not the person who is disabled. The society is disabling the person because they're not allowing the person to live in the rhythm of their wiring with the accommodations that support them. And so, yeah, it's really remarkable that I've gotten this totally alternate reality through the laborious work of figuring out, like, what were the accommodations that I needed. And I wasn't accessing those by choice so much as life kind of forced me into them, right? I slowly lost my job in the public schools because I was out so much from the migraines and because I was having so many conflicts with the other professionals, and because I was crying in meetings, and so the accommodation that I made was I switched to online work in public schools as a speech pathologist. And I intuitively figured out that the thing that I was worst at was interacting with the adults. The thing that I was best at was interacting with the kids. So I switched to evaluation only, which meant that I was only spending time with the kids. And I would pop into schools, so I was not at one regular school. I would pop into a different school every day. So I had no real relationships with the adults. And I would have the school site evaluator present my report. So I didn't go to any of the meetings. So I would spend my 2 to 6 hours with the kid. Then I'd send all the paperwork over to the adults and I'd be done with it. And I was doing it online from home. And so I wasn't in the fluorescent lighted building with all the noise. I wasn't having to be there at a certain time. You know, I scheduled things in the afternoon and did my writing in the morning so that I had slow mornings, and I added my walk in the morning, and I, barely interacted with humans, and the humans I did interact with were children, which have always been so easy for me because they're very literal and straightforward. And even on top of that, I was doing bilingual only evaluations. I figured out that those were the ones that were the most pleasant for me because these second language speakers were very literal. They were not, being confusing for me, which anyone who uses idioms or, sarcasm or non-literal language are typically. So I sort of created this little pocket of the world for me. Now, I was still having conflicts with school districts who were upset at me advocating for the second language speakers to not be labeled with a disability. And so that conflict was weighing on me. And in that sense, I was wanting to get out of the schools still, but I had really accommodated myself incredibly wisely, honestly, without really realizing I was doing it. So I was at home, I was on my own schedule, I was only interacting with these second language speaker kids. I was spending a lot of time, on my own writing. I was a little bored, and I was a little tired of the conflict. So I was still wanting to do something different. And what I kept saying is I want to have spiritual conversations with people. That's what I want to do about meaning making, which is my special interest, is what are we doing here? What is this life about? What does it mean? And that special interest has always been with me. And so, I was adjusting my life and accommodating my life along the way through kind of being forced out of the job I thought I would keep for my whole career. And in the home life, there was also accommodations that were being made that weren't by choice. I realized that I had never lived alone, and there was one brief moment in time, but very short. And that the stress of living with other people was significant for me in terms of sensory and having enough access to solitude. And so marriage and family life growing up, and then marriage and having a kid was particularly challenging for me. And because that ended so awfully with a very dramatic divorce, I got the accommodation of living alone. And I only have my kid half time. So half of the week, I have this enforced parenting break where I can be in complete solitude and focus on taking care of myself. And because my parenting rights were being questioned in terms of my psychological, fitness to be a parent, I was extremely motivated to work on my psychological wellness. And so I dove super hard into dialectical behavioral therapy, which honestly, it was created by Marsha Linehan to support people with a borderline diagnosis. And she later came out as saying that she had a borderline diagnosis herself. And it's a mix of Zen Buddhism and cognitive behavioral therapy. But I honestly, the more I understand autism in specifically high masking assigned female at birth people, I think that it may be that Marsha Linehan she's still alive, autism or is autistic, because of the way that DBT is so straightforward in creating an operational guide for how to be a person in this society in a way that's going to be super accommodating for folks who are emotionally sensitive. And so through DBT, it was like a manual for me to build, the slogan or catchphrase of DBT is build a life worth living. And it's like a instruction guide, a manual. It's very literal, very practical. It's not like loosey-goosey, just think positive thoughts. It's super literal, like a handout for how to do everything. And step-by-step guide. And so that was a huge accommodation for me to learn this step-by-step manual guide for how to be a person in this society. And even though I really, with all these accommodations in place, was doing great with mindfulness, emotion regulation, and distress tolerance, the one thing that was still not really working for me was interpersonal effectiveness. I couldn't figure out how to use the skills effectively. And part of that was because I was believing that the outcome had to be positive in order for the skill to have been effective. And I've since learned that that is not what those skills are for. Those skills are for taking care of you and keeping you aligned with values and integrity as you move through conflicts, knowing that the other person may not ever get on the same page as you, and that is not an indicator that you didn't use the skill effectively. But regardless, I continued to have challenges interpersonally where there would end up some sort of change in the relationship or end of the relationship or conflict in the relationship, and I would be sincerely baffled what happened. I'd be like, I have no idea what happened. What is going on? And no matter, 10 years into DBT, taking the interpersonal effectiveness module so many times, because it's like a 9-month class, so like probably 15 times. And I was like, I don't know. I don't know what it is. I can't figure out how to be in relationship with other people. And so when I started learning about this high masking presentation, in femme or assigned female at birth, or, more diverse populations than the like white savant boy from a upper middle class family, I started thinking, you know what? This is something. And my specialization as a speech pathologist was autism and, multilingualism. But I had always been incredibly effective when working with autistic kids. And there was sort of a thing that I used to always say, like, oh yeah, well, the people who are best with autistic kids are autistic. And so probably that's me. But it was really true. It was a frequency wavelength wiring that really worked for me. And it makes so much sense. I just had a different presentation of it. And so, the past, I'd say 2 or 3 years, I have been learning more and more and more about this presentation of autism, and had sought out an evaluation last year, and that ended in a very confusing interpersonal conflict, which I was like, further evidence for my autism. And I recently was like, I'm going to try this again. I was motivated because I have a lot of clients who are kind of like neuro complexity questioning. And I wanted to find a resource for evaluation that was more focused on understanding yourself evaluation rather than traditional diagnostics. And that was really skilled in understanding this, level 1 presentation, as it's called now, especially in AFAB people and gender diverse people. And so I attended a training last year with Corey Andreas and was like, oh my gosh, this is it. This is her. This is the person. So I had 5 or 6 sessions with her, evaluation sessions. And basically what she does is she takes the DSM categories and she goes through each one and asks questions and then records a narrative of my words about how I fit those criteria or don't fit those criteria, and then sort of adds it up and makes a diagnosis. Now, some people want a diagnosis because they want work accommodations or access to disability services in educational environments, or for, getting support to not work, housing, all sorts of things. And that's something that is super valid. And then other people want it just for self-reflection. That's more of what I want it for, to understand myself better and understand my clients better, and understand what options are there for folks, what accommodations, what modifications can be made to create the life that's most worth living for me and for the folks around me. And so she takes you through all these questions. What was friendship like for you when you were little? What was, how do you feel about food textures? How do you feel about, one of the questions I thought was hilarious was, do you often find yourself in a dark room? One of the biggest conflicts my dad and I had growing up was that he would come in and be like, turn on the lights, you're going to hurt your eyes, because I'd be reading on the ground in a little corner in the dark. He'd always been like, I bought you this beautiful desk to do your work at, and I have all these lights, and you're in a corner on the ground in the dark. And I was like, yes, I feel dizzy if I sit in a chair. So yeah, just tons and tons and tons and tons of questions. What is it like for you in work relationships? How do you do in a group meeting? How do you do in a group project? How do you do with romantic stuff? How do you do with, smells, lights, sounds in childhood and adulthood? And then she groups all those responses into what she calls a narrative report, which is basically just like all of my words underneath the subheadings of the categories, diagnostic categories from the DSM for autism. And it was, like I said, super duper interesting, super validating, super like, oh my gosh, I basically like created a world and a life where there's nothing pushing up against my autism, really. Like, if my kid is around, I'm wearing earplugs. I have, I wear a hat 100% of the time so that if I need to go to the grocery store or be somewhere where there's overhead lights, I'm good. I have twinkle lights in my house instead of overhead lights. I have, like I said, a slow morning so that I can take my time, think about the meaning of life, do things like this, express and explore, take my long walks. I have very finite interaction with other humans, and it's based primarily off of my interests. So I spend time with people, with my clients, talking about things that are really meaningful to me, and then I spend time with people at a library class that's about something I'm interested in, or at an art class, or I only hang out with friends like when we're going on a walk or doing an art thing so that I don't have to do eye contact. I eat the same foods every single day. I have like a super, super, super routine life. I don't go on vacations. I don't do a lot of the things that people think make a full, rich life, but I have a full, rich life instead of one that is like defined by my panic and drama and trauma. So it was super validating, super interesting. I would recommend it to anyone who's interested in understanding themselves better, because even just the conversations that we had were super, super fascinating, because she's also autistic, so she can share personal examples. I can now share this information with my therapist and with people who are significant in my life, friends and family. And if I ever wanted to use it for any kind of, work accommodation or something, if I were ever in that position, I could. So it was really a rewarding experience. It is not covered by insurance. So that's one thing. And she's only in certain states, but she gave me the resource of pdanorthamerica.org, which has a bunch of professionals who can diagnose autism or offer therapy specific for autistic people that they're all trained in PDA and PDA affirming and like autistic affirming. And so that's a fabulous resource for anyone looking for a therapist or diagnostician in North America. That would be covered by insurance possibly, or who is licensed in your state. They also have like classes and support groups and for parents of PDA kids and PDA adults. Great resource. Really positive experience. And now I feel like, wow, I feel so proud of myself, honestly, that I have resourced myself in such significant ways and like followed what my system needed and, haven't pushed myself to be more like other people, even though sometimes it's tempting, right? I also have been hugely accommodated by letting go of rules around gender and just rules in general. I think letting go of gender rules opened me up to questioning every rule. And now I don't do anything the way that people expect me to. and it feels so good, and I have so much autonomy, and yeah, really incredible. And I don't have some of the things that maybe other people think are important, but I'm really content, and my life feels very worth living. So it's a pretty big, exciting deal, and I'm excited to be able to share it with you all. If anyone has any questions, reach out to me. If you want Corey's information, I'll put her website and the PDA North America website in the description. CoreyAndreas.com. She's also on Instagram with a lot of good information. I'm also going to put the link to the resource for a self-assessment tool that I thought was fabulous. That's only like $20 or something, through Dr. Colleen Sierra, who is also on Instagram. It is an excellent resource for understanding autism and ADHD. And then Lindsey Mackereth, who's got 2 substacks. That's one of my other favorite resources on this sort of high masking neurocomplexity, giftedness to autistic burnout lifespan model that she has is super fascinating and validating. Yeah, it's been so fun and so meaningful to me, and I'm so glad to be able to share it with you all. And let me know if you have any thoughts or questions. And if you're a person who wants to, basically what this all comes down to is like untangling from the rules and messages and societal expectations and allowing yourself to live in the way that is supportive for you. And that requires some nervous system resilience and flexibility, because when we're just terrified, we can't even think about what might work for us. And so, the Safe and Sound protocol and the nervous system work that I do was initially researched with autistic folks, because that is a population who is, more sensitive in terms of nervous system wiring, and more prone to go into a defense state more quickly and stay there longer than the typical person when there's a threat detected. And it takes far less threat detected to trigger a defense state in a autistic or neurodivergent person. And so getting some nervous system support can be a real game changer for folks like us. And I would love to share what I've learned with you if you're interested. Okay. Lots of love.